This is Support is Sexy, episode 71, with Abiola Abrams, Spiritpreneur and founder of Sacred Bombshell. Welcome to the Support is Sexy podcast. I'm your host, Elayne Fluker, entrepreneur, author, producer, and founder of Chic Rebellion Media. 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, I talk to women entrepreneurs who share their journeys and the true stories of their wins and their lessons, and give you insight and inspiration to take your business and your life to the next level. Here we go. Hi, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of Support is Sexy. I'm so excited to have you here because you know it just would not be the same without you. So today we are welcoming Abiola Abrams, and Abiola is a spiritpreneur, and she is the founder of the Sacred Bombshell, and her business is all about enlightenment, encouraging women to truly follow their path, find their voice, and in helping them build their business in a way that aligns with who they are and what they want to create in the world. So it's a great balance of spirituality, but also a balance of this is the part of the business that we need to make sure is taken care of. So in this episode, Abiola talks to us about what a spiritpreneur is and why you should be compensated appropriately for being one. She also talks about how to get clear about what you offer, whom you serve, and how you add value to people's lives, the importance of listening to your audience and asking them what they need, why an audience that is not targeted is irrelevant, how to avoid being a wounded healer. I never heard that term before used in this way that she uses it in this episode, but very important to listen out for that, being a wounded healer. How to get over people pleasing at a micro and macro level, ways to start over again after a public failure. And in this episode, Abiola actually shares a failure or a setback that she has never shared before. And what I think is great is that she talks about how our challenges can help our experiences and our work become richer. So it's not just something to hide and be ashamed of. You can absolutely learn from it. And of course, I believe there's power in sharing. That's what this show is all about. She also talks about how to avoid the sunk cost fallacy. And if you've never heard that term, you'll find out what it is in this episode. And also, very important, you can't bitch about it. You got to be about it. So I know you're going to enjoy this episode. Plenty of great gems and information in here. So without further ado, Abiola Abrams. So Abiola, thank you so much for joining us on an episode of Support is Sexy. I'm excited to have you here.
Ooh, I'm so excited too, Elayne. Thank you for having me.
Of course, my pleasure. Finally, right? We get to
Finally.
After all this time. Excellent. Now, first question I ask everyone, when did you first fall in love with entrepreneurship?
That's a great question. I think that it had to be as a kid, which I'm sure that you hear a lot from entrepreneurs, that my family I come from an immigrant family. And my dad, although he was, somewhat of an entrepreneur in the things that he did, but my parents are really the only people in my family probably that had traditional jobs, that a lot of members of my family started their own businesses. So it was just what I saw growing up. And so I remember as a kid, pretending to have my own business that, when I had you remember the little kitchen set we all had with the stove and the sink and everything? I turned mine over on the side and turned it into a desk. Oh. And then in the little stove area, I had like my little papers and Post-its and things.
Oh my gosh. I love that.
So I think that it was, from the very beginning, although, there have been a lot of detours in terms of me coming to trust that entrepreneurship was necessary and is the way.
That was the Easy Bake Oven, right? That's probably what it was. I was sitting here trying to think of what that was called. I know I had an Easy Bake Oven.
No, it wasn't the Easy Bake. I did have the Easy Bake Oven. It wasn't that one. There was another one that was like from Toys R Us that didn't do anything. It was like just for show. Like it had the refrigerator that you open.
I love it.
So the refrigerator became my file cabinet.
Now, how did you know those things? Was it because I know you say you saw examples of people as entrepreneurs, but did you actually go into an office with some family and sort of really see and experience how it works?
Yes, not only did I go to the office on occasion with both of my parents, which was amazing, but also because both of my parents are writers. And if anyone knows writers, especially, I guess from like our generation, I don't know if it's still necessarily true for people who are 20 years old, but we have a lot of papers. We have a lot of books. We have our desk with a lot of stuff going on, and so my dad, being a working writer, always had in my house growing up, his desk with his books and his papers and his things that he was doing. And then my mom had her smaller desk with her things that she wrote. And so my mom would write things like she would write poetry, and she would write sequels to childhood stories. So like when she read me Goldilocks and the Three Bears and I said, Mommy, what happens next? She would write a little mini book for me. And so from seeing my parents, it seemed like what you do if you want to play as a grown up. You sit at a desk. I don't know, somehow you sell people stuff. And people are interested in what you have to say. Like, that was my childhood business model.
I love it. And that's basically it. That's perfect.
And create clubs. That was another thing I did. I created all these little clubs that didn't have anyone in it, but it would be the such and such club. And, I would make up names of people that were in the clubs. I don't know where I got this from, but it's interesting because it's kind of, like you said, what we're doing now in a way.
Yeah, it's so amazing. That's why I usually ask everyone, all the guests, this question, because it's so interesting to hear where people started and just sort of how things come back full circle, whether it's how they create their business or the path of their career or what they're doing for people in service to people now. There's always some kind of connection or thread there.
Definitely. And I think, Elayne, especially for women, that this is where our independence comes in. Like when, as a kid, my mom sold Avon. And so that was her business. And it wasn't strange to me to be a multi-hyphenate because both of my parents were multi-hyphenates. And so it's like, okay, she's got her Avon thing going and she's got her 9 to 5, then she's got this and she's got that. Like I said, I was the first person in my family born in America. And so a lot of my family members didn't come here with job opportunities because they, quote unquote, spoke funny, or, their degrees didn't necessarily translate and weren't accepted, by the institutions here. And so they started their own businesses.
I love it. Now, your family's from Guyana, right?
My family's from Guyana, yes.
Nice. Now, where did you grow up? Did you grow up in New York? I know you're in New York now.
Yeah, I grew up in New York, born and raised. I say that I am a multi-borough New Yorker, born in Brooklyn. Born in Brooklyn, grew up in Queens, went to school in Manhattan, and in upstate New York. So I am a true New Yorker.
Now, what was a young Abiola like? I know that obviously entrepreneurial, but what would you say your personality was like when you were younger?
Now, the interesting thing is, Elayne, if other people saw me, entrepreneurial wouldn't have come to mind. It would have been more like bookish, studious. People used to call me really sweet, which I hated. Like I hated that so much with a passion and wanted to be like everything the opposite, because the kids that were popular were not sweet.
Right. I went through that too. You're so nice. Yeah.
You're so nice. Right. You're like, I'm not. But then you really were.
Right.
And so, I was a kid that, like, my mom would turn off the lights and then I would still be reading, under the covers, like trying to still, like, I just read a lot and was just very into reading and writing. And, that was my experience as a kid.
I love it. Now, who or what were your greatest influences growing up?
My greatest influences growing up, I would have to say it's really interesting. I come from a really huge family. Even my immediate family is really big. And so that was a big influence. I had influences that were negative influences that influenced me in a positive way, and positive influences. So the positive influences were reading books, as a little kid, like reading, like, this is corny, but like the Little House on the Prairie books. And then as a teen, getting to read and know about Toni Morrison and Gloria Naylor, who we just lost, and, all of these wonderful writers. And the beautiful thing for you and I is that we were able to grow up in the age and era of Oprah. And so whereas, there weren't necessarily, people feel like they grew up in times where they weren't seeing themselves on screen, but we were able to see ourselves reflected. Like we were all Vanessa on The Cosby Show, or my sister's generation, they were all Rudy, Right. And so, that was very influential. Something that I would say was a negative influence was that my family was bullied really badly in my neighborhood because there were not a lot of immigrants at that time. And so, we were told on a daily basis, go back to your country, and people in my family were beat up and stuff like that. Oh. And so what that did at a really early age is it gave me a resilience. And it also gave me the understanding that, all right, well, if you don't fit in anywhere anyway, then what are you going to do? Then you kind of have to create your own path, because it's like, okay, was in a middle-class Black neighborhood, but they didn't feel like we were American enough or Black enough or whatever it was. We didn't fit in with them. I didn't fit in with the kids in my schools, which were predominantly white. And so then it gave me a means, a lesson at an early age to create your own voice, to create your own path, to stand firmly in who you are. And then the third influence, I would have to say, hip hop was a big influence for me growing up. You know, a member of the hip hop generation. And so growing up and listening to, you know, Salt and Pepper or, you know, whoever, like these women with their voices that would get out there and speak their minds, and, you know, TLC later on and all of that, you know, it meant something to me. For me, it was a means. I was in a hip hop group when I was a teen.
Were
and
you?
I was, and it was a means of like the first time of like people getting to hear my voice and me getting to hear my voice.
Right.
That I was a poet before that, but where were you really going to read poetry as a kid? You know, so it was a way of like translating that into me being able to stand in myself and put my voice out there.
Thank you for sharing all of that with us, especially I can imagine it's tough to talk about your family going through what they went through and being bullied and treated as something other when really you were part of the community.
Yeah.
Do you feel like being into hip hop and then especially being in a group and using your voice sort of helped you through that time as well?
It did help. It helped a lot, actually. And what's interesting, what I've learned since as an adult, is a lot of the early founders of hip hop were of Caribbean descent as well. We're all first generation Americans like me. So that was really interesting.
Cool Herc, I think, is Jamaican, right?
Yeah, they're all Caribbean American. And so, you know, it did definitely, you know, help me to be able to, you know, stand in my own and because as a shy kid, as an introverted kid, as a nerdy, geeky kid, who then, you know, didn't feel like she fit in with the people that looked like her, it was just a really challenging thing. But I feel like my work that I do today, everything that I do is richer because of it.
Because of that experience.
Because of that experience. Absolutely.
Isn't that interesting how we pull those things, whether negative or positive at that time, forward into the work we do in some way or another, whether we're conscious of it or not?
Yes. And I don't think that I wouldn't be able, and I think this is true for all of us, Elayne, you know, without those things that were the hardest, that I wouldn't be able to be me in the fullest sense of who I am.
That's right. Now, were you always drawn to spirituality? Because that is such a part of the kind of work that you do today, which of course we're going to get into, but was that always a part of your life?
It was. And the interesting thing is that until, you know, very recently, like maybe within the past 5 years or so, I didn't feel comfortable to really bring it out. Like I felt like it was something I had to kind of keep in the closet and sneak in there with other things, you know. I called it hiding the vitamins in the candy. But I had a very spiritual upbringing because among my father's like 27 immigrant jobs is that my dad is also a minister and a preacher.
Okay.
And so I'm a preacher's kid, but he was not your traditional Black minister that my dad, when I was growing up, you know, he studied yoga and, you know, he studies Kabbalah, and he's more of a student of spirituality that informs his Christianity and his preaching that he does. And then on my mom's side of the family, my great grandmother was a midwife and a women's fertility healer, like back in the day. And then my grandparents on both sides were farmers, and my mom's dad was like the like, I guess like a councilman is the equivalent in his community, and also very like spiritual in the work that he did. So it's something that's in my family. There are people in my family that make money and, you know, their primary job is as a reader or, you know, a spiritualist. So it's something definitely that has been a part of my experience my whole life.
And when did it come to the point for you where you felt like, okay, this is something that you personally wanted to make a career out of and eventually build your business from this space of really, it's not monetizing spirituality, but really figuring out how to make spirituality be a part of your business, a part of your everyday in that way, in your work?
I think, Elayne, that it evolved naturally, like during the past 10 years, that originally, like I said, I felt like it was something that I had to hide. And then what I learned more, like you, I've worked both in mainstream and indie media.
Right.
And as the media industry changed, for people who are not aware of this, that, Elayne and I were both in the industry like 2008, 2009, when everything in mainstream media kind of fell apart. And so, then you had to figure out a way to kind of make your own way and balance and figure out where most people figured out a way to balance the two. Mm-hmm. And so when I was rebuilding kind of, who I was and what I was putting into the world from scratch without, necessarily having the support of a mainstream media house behind me like I did in the past, it was about, okay, am I going to come forward authentically? Or am I going to continue, to present something that I'm not? And it has been, it's a challenging thing, for people who have a history of being bullied often or even just people who grow up as, the nice girl, the good girl we were talking about. A lot of us are people pleasers. Mm-hmm. And so we have the natural thing of wanting to please people on a micro and a macro level. And so it's about me coming into my own authenticity and being like, the beautiful thing about the world that we live in now, where we are directly in contact with our audience. Right now, we are directly in contact with your tribe. There's no one in between you and Chic Rebellion and your audience, which is a beautiful thing. We can be authentic. Right. We don't have Svengali saying, well, no, you can't bring that to the table. No, you can't bring this to the table.
The advertisers won't like that.
Right, yeah. Right. Which was a big part of my background before, during the period of time that we're working in mainstream media, was my primary source of income.
Where were you at the time when this, like you mentioned in 2008, when things sort of fell apart? Where were you working at that time in media? Or In 2008, I was hosting a show for BET that came on at like 10 o'clock at night on Sundays. Mm-hmm. And it was named the Best Shorts. It was a short film show. Mm-hmm. That at the time I was a broadcaster, on-air personality, in addition to being a filmmaker, producer, writer, director, etc., mm-hmm. who was doing my own products on the side. And so my work was very firmly rooted in mainstream media. I had the show on BET. I also had my first novel was published at the time by Simon & Schuster, which is all the same company, part of Viacom. At least it was at the time. I haven't, followed it up. Right.
And then I was doing other broadcasts on other networks like NBC and that sort of thing. But my work was very much firmly, it was, it's the same as anyone who works somewhere and they get a paycheck.
Right.
It wasn't owning a business. It was, I work for these people. And so I've got to do what they say. And
exactly.
So, it was interesting, Elayne, that at the time, I also was, making art films. And so my films would be playing in festivals. And, I was blessed to be able to, travel to Berlin and other places where my films were showing in film festivals. And there was this one festival this art film that I had done that was too racy for the network when I was on air. And although I was receiving awards, I can't remember if I think that was like 2007, 2008 at
What's
the time.
What's the name of it?
Aphrodite Superstar, and it was
nice.
About Black women and sexuality. Yeah, all of my films were about taboo topics, so like depression and mental health and the topics that we face as women of color, but that we felt forced to not have a voice on. And so the network didn't give me the green light to be able to go to represent my own work at a festival.
Mm.
My work that I created myself. But that's what it was. And then, that's what it still is if you work for corporate entity.
It's so interesting. One of the reasons that I asked you too, where you were, at that time is because I don't know if you went through this, but it's, can often be jarring or just enlightening when you're not at a big company anymore. And then the phone calls that you used to make that people used to respond to right away, they don't respond so quickly anymore, especially when you're starting your own thing. That's the reason I wanted to mention it for anyone going through that now or who has been through that. You're not alone. It's just, and not that those people necessarily, because I've had to tell myself this, it's not that they were all about the company that you were with. It's just that you don't necessarily have that outlet anymore. Your outlet is different and it doesn't work for everybody. And it's tough sometimes not to take that personal, but in business, you learn pretty quickly. I don't know if you experienced this, that you have to move on, keep creating, and
Yes.
build a new tribe, to use your language from earlier.
Yes, Elayne, I learned that definitely. And I did take it personally.
I
Like
did
it was,
too.
yeah.
That's why I'm mentioning it. It's like, I gave you a chance. I put you in the magazine. You don't even call me back.
Yes. Yes. It's like, what? Like I put you on.
I
I
put
had
you
you on my
on.
show. And now you like now I can't get a ring back.
Now you
Okay.
don't know me.
Wow.
Exactly.
Wow. But then they come back around again when other things are on and popping and you're like, oh, okay. Definitely. And it's interesting. Something that, I think is important for people to take heed of, no matter where you are in your career and in building your business, is that you never know who somebody is and,
Right.
where they might end up. And so don't underestimate anyone, meet people, treat people the way that you would want to be treated, and see them as, their evolved selves. The assistants that you may be not talking to, today are going to be the CEOs of tomorrow.
Exactly. Treat people, not as their positions.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Because also, like the people that you look around the room that, may seem like the flashiest person that has everything going on, it's probably the person sitting in the corner, who's not trying to make an impression on anyone, that is the person maybe who may be most helpful for you. So when you're treating people as human beings and not as their position or what they can do for you, that I think that that's a much more powerful and humanistic place to come from.
Absolutely. Now, what was your first step when you were in that position and then this transition was required? Is that when you went into creating your business, being a spiritpreneur, which we'll talk about what exactly that is, but is that when you decided to make the transition into that space, or did you go into another 9 to 5?
Not yet.
Yeah.
I had a big stumble. And this is probably like where I get like my biggest like business lesson about being an entrepreneur, that I had started. I was dabbling kind of in indie media as much as you were able to do back then. It was just a different climate, so I had what, cobbled together could be called a blog, but wasn't really called that at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I also had a very early podcast that started in 2005 when podcasting first came out. Like I was like, okay,
Wow.
let me play with this and see what it is. So I had that at the time, but none of those were necessarily like active, ongoing business models. And then I was offered from the umbrella at Viacom, they asked me to do a reality show. And so, again, to paint people a picture, the crazy thing was that this was in the era of like Flavor Flav and I forget what the other guy is, his name is, but all of those like crazy kind of, I don't want to use judgmental language, but
right. Those eccentric characters.
Yes, perfectly spoken. Those eccentric characters, celeb reality kind of things that were going on. And the way that it was pitched to me was, if you are a part of, it wasn't one of those shows, but it was on, one of the same networks. If you do this reality show that, it would be really powerful for you to give a different, since you're so critical of it, a different view of, a different Black woman, which for me was really, really appealing and important at the time to put. If you don't like the voices that are out there, you need to put your voice out there. If you don't like the faces that are out there, if they feel non-representative for you, don't, I don't want to curse on your broadcast, but don't bitch about it. Be about it. Put
right.
yourself out there. Put your voice out there. And so, it was the first season of this show, and they were like, be a part of this reality show on VH1, and who was it? Drew Barrymore was one of the executive producers, and they were like, it'll be a reality version of He's Just Not That Into You, and you should totally do it, and blah, 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 blah. And so I did this show, and they were like, it'll help explode your audience to the mainstream, because I had done mostly Black media up until that point.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, okay, so I did it. And they were like, you'll be able also to promote your book and your podcast and your this and your that. And they made it sound really appealing. At the time, my business game was not tight. And so I didn't get any of those things in writing. The idea that I could go on VH1 and promote my book was really, really amazing and attractive to me. The idea that I could go on VH1 and also show a different voice and a different way of being for a Black woman was also really attractive for me. So after that experience, where I grew an audience, and this is another thing really important for your entrepreneurs who are listening, it's not about numbers. You don't want just any audience. An audience that is not targeted to what you offer is irrelevant. Right. Not irrelevant in terms of, because no one is irrelevant, but they're not relevant to you as a person building a business, building a voice, building a platform. And so, it was just really, really kind of a crazy, crazy time. And so it was from there, coming out of that, that I then was like, okay, I have to build my own thing. Because I remember at the time, one of the things, Elayne, was that, social media at that time, we were just coming out of MySpace land and making the transition into Facebook, and Black Planet was like still active. And I remember that I had a partnership with Black Planet and I was doing videos for them, digital broadcasting for Black Planet. And I had, 400, I had 500,000 friends on Black Planet. And
Wow.
then and so then when that crashed, then I really learned the importance of, I didn't have any of those people's emails. Right. I didn't have any direct access to that audience, that any platform, even if you build your business on Facebook or, Instagram or whatever. Right. Yeah. And you're not having a way to build a funnel where people can actively engage with you, then at any point that platform can go away. It can shift the access. It can change the rules. And so that was when I was like, okay, I had a whole lot of flash and stuff going on, but I didn't have a business. And that's when I had a shift.
That's so powerful. Thank you for sharing that. And especially the part about, one, going after like you said, the shiny things that look like it could have been, and for trusting, the part of business is everything is fine until it isn't, right? So
everything is fine until it isn't.
Until you start asking for what people promise, and then all of a sudden it's not fine. But then also the part that you mentioned about building your list and really owning your list, or being really engaged with your key audience for people who are especially younger. Social media is great. Having big followings is fantastic, but you don't own the access to those people.
Right.
Like you think about even Facebook pages. You could have 1 million followers on your Facebook page, but you'll see only 13 people saw the post that you put up. And not because only 13 people were online, millions were online, but because they're like, yeah, you could pay $5 to get it in front of the people who have already said that they want to see you.
Your page.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. So who knows when these other channels, or other platforms rather, are going to change. So thank you. That was such a good point of owning the list, and then not getting caught up in, I say this to myself, how big your list even is. A big list is great, but it's also who's on your list and how engaged they are.
Yes, that's what is key. The main thing is engagement. That's the number one thing, that, having high engagement, even for people who are wanting to be, brand ambassadors and engage with brands, that it's the engagement that they're going to look at more than the numbers. If you are coming to them with these extreme numbers and no one is engaging, that's why it doesn't make sense to purchase followers, that are robots that are not going to engage with your content or purchase anything you have.
Right. Exactly. Now, so what was your first step then after that experience? And as I imagine, licking your wounds from that experience and taking the learning experience with you, what was your first step to building the business that you have now, which is, we should say, is Sacred Bombshell?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So the first step was really to first of all, get real and figure out who I was. Because when you're doing a lot of media stuff, you can kind of lose yourself in it. Figure out who I am authentically, and then what I wanted my voice to be and what my mission statement was. What was my mission? What was my purpose? What was I going to be doing? What was I going to be creating? And for whom? And what I realized was that, there were threads in the things that I was doing before. Even, now the hats that I wear are writer, coach, speaker, product creator, and broadcaster. But under those 5 hats, with those 5 hats, I think is only one thing that I do is I'm a teacher at heart. And it just is on different platforms. And so being clear about your mission, what it is that you offer, who it is that you serve, that was also a lesson that I had to learn again, even after that when I was clear about my mission and then was clear about the things that I was going to create and what I was going to put out there, I still had in my head, which a lot of entrepreneurs do when we start out, is, okay, I'm making this for everybody. Right. Nobody is for everybody.
Right.
By trying to appeal to everyone, you appeal to no one. Mm-hmm. And so, it's really important to niche down and be really, really specific about the people that you were talking to. So I knew even, I was like, okay, I want to empower women. What does that mean? Probably everyone listening on this line wants to empower women, right. So that by itself doesn't mean anything. One of the things that was really helpful for me, and I recommend this for anyone who is wanting to kind of, if you're starting from scratch, building an audience, write a book, or if you've written books before, write a new book that is aimed directly at, who it is that you're talking to, because that's a great way to not only state who you are, what your mission is, to add value to your audience. The only time that, commerce is exchanged is really, from a point of, for me, my work is my ministry, but adding value to people's lives. What is the value you're putting out? So take that, put it into a book, or even these days, it doesn't even have to be, a physical book. It could be a website that is standing in the way in the means of a book or a podcast or whatever it is, and putting that out there. That this is a side explanation, but I feel like it's really powerful for your audience, Elayne. This weekend, I was at a conference where I learned that women, we spend 30 minutes more than men in a presentation explaining who we are and why we deserve to be in the room. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times women, we feel like we have to validate ourselves. We feel like we have to explain who we are to be able to do things. But the truth is, when you put it out there and say, this is who I am, this is what I offer, people accept you at face value. So Elayne saying, support is sexy, join me on this journey. We accept her. We look and we say, wow, look at her. This is great. And we take the ride with her. She doesn't have to further validate herself. So that's a really, really important thing. For me as a writer, that what I started to do was write things that were specifically in my voice to the audience that I wanted to talk to. Before, I had done stuff for Yahoo OMG that was aimed at pop cultural things and things like that were really, really fun, but it didn't necessarily have anything to do with the audience I wanted to talk to or what my passion or heart needs were.
Now, how did you determine your audience or your avatar, as people say now, but the woman that you decided that you wanted to serve? Because I think what you said is so important, that everyone starts from the place of, I want to serve everybody. But then it's like, okay, great. Now get more narrow and more focused and keep going in and in until you really zone in on that person that you want to serve, and then the people like that person. How did you go about that?
Well, it wasn't a linear thing. That I've had advice columns for a really long time. Even when I was at BET, actually, I had an advice column with Rolling Out back in the days, a Dear Abiola column. And what I noticed, what I started to pay attention to were the people that were engaging with my content. The more and more niche I got, kind of what you said, the further that you go in, who was still rolling with me, who was still rocking with me, and then I started to ask questions. As an entrepreneur, as a business person, you should be very curious about the people that you are serving. And so I started to ask people, straight up, what are your issues? What is it that, how can I serve you? What is it that you would want to learn from me? And I found something really, really interesting, that, the things that I feel like I was born to teach, which is primarily in the area of helping to remove limiting beliefs and blocks and the things that keep us small, the stories that we make up about ourselves that keep us in a limited way. That those are the things that women told me were their primary issues. But the interesting thing was that the gateway to talking about those issues, something that's so intimate, came in the way of, often our relationships. So I started out actually from a platform of after that with love, dating and relationships, because the VH1 show that I came out of was a relationship show. So those were the advice questions people were asking me first. And what I realized was that there was a self-love and self-esteem solution to every problem, no matter what it is, that there was that at heart, there's a self-worth solution. And so what I learned is that if you're wanting to make a business of that, is that you sell people what it is that they want and you give them what they need. So, in the beginning, when people were just asking me relationship related questions, because I was also very outspoken about my own relationship foibles, and, I had a marriage that crashed and burned and all of that. And so people were asking those things. And what I realized that it was coming back to was issues of self-love and self-esteem and empowerment. But so giving them what it is that they want and sliding in what they need. And in a way that's actually what then further built the business to where, it became about building better relationships with yourself, with your partners, and even with your business as well. So again, giving them what they want on a surface level and then sliding in what they need. So a lot of the people that I then started to do coaching, because people asked me for it. It wasn't something that I had even in my head to do. I was doing advice columns and as a writer, that's what I was doing. And I was making YouTube videos, but people started to ask me for coaching. Mm-hmm. And I remember the first person who asked me for coaching, I wasn't even sure what it was, I wasn't sure, when we were growing up, there were these Tony Robbins infomercials and I wasn't, right. And I was speaking. A lot of schools started booking me to speak. And so it became a natural transition. And then I went and got my coaching certification when another friend of ours in this industry that does what we do, she had to cancel an event. She was a speaker in an event that I was hosting, and she had to cancel because she said she was doing her coaching certification exam. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. What is that?
Right. It's funny how things enter our consciousness and it's like, oh, okay. I need to know about that.
I need to know about that. And then I was like, okay, that is a way for me to do what it is that people are asking me to do and what I'm doing already and be able to have more information about it.
I love that. Now, what you do is called a spiritpreneur, right?
Yes.
What is a spiritpreneur? And how do we know when we are one, when that is our thing?
Yes. So a spiritpreneur, Elayne, is a heart-centered, spirit-centered, conscious entrepreneur who is creating from their purpose and their spirit. Mm-hmm. And the reason why I make the designation is that there are special things that we need as a spiritpreneur that, another kind of an entrepreneur doesn't necessarily need. I always give the example of my uncle who runs he has an extermination business. Now he's into his business because it makes money for his family. He did it because it serves a need, but he doesn't sit at home thinking about pests and how to kill. But it's not his passion. It's not his hard work. It's right. Not, for him, it's a business that he loves because it keeps his family, fed and happy. It's not it doesn't feed his heart and his soul like his fishing does or his other things that he may be interested in. Mm-hmm. For those of us who are spiritpreneurs, we have chosen to take our heart's calling, our passion. A lot of us are coaches, healers, teachers. We empower other people. And then we've taken that and created our business. And the reason why I say, Elayne, that we have different needs is that a lot of us are reluctant leaders.
Yeah.
A lot of us feel a calling, but then we feel all of those other issues that say, who do you think you are? Who does she think she is? We have imposter syndrome,
right?
We have a lot of us abundance issues, which I had for a long time, as a spiritual teacher, feeling conflict about, taking money,
I was going to ask you about that. A lot of women, and then especially spiritpreneurs, have this sort of inner battle about, I shouldn't accept money because I'm helping people in this way.
Yes, absolutely. It's something that I have dealt with, and it's one of the programs I'm doing next year in 2017 is about getting unblocked with your money issues, because it's a big thing that I noticed a pattern that almost every job that I walked away from, through my own regard of wanting to leave or the company making a transition. As you know, there are a lot of transitions in media. So everything almost that I walked away from, I would somehow end up with them owing me money. Like somehow it would always end up where something wasn't right, or the money wasn't right, or there were all these like money issues. Or even with me coaching people, who couldn't afford to pay, and had different issues. And there are ways to, if you are wanting to serve people who are having financial issues, you could start a not-for-profit, or serve higher level clients, so that then you can maybe do scholarships or something like that. But if your whole business is based on serving people who are not able to help you to be able to serve your own life and your own self, then you're now a wounded healer or a martyr, which is not healthy. It's not healthy. It's not a healthy place to create from. You cannot give from an empty cup. And so these are issues specifically that I address through, I have one of the new program that I have coming out is the Badass Spiritpreneur Warrior Sisterhood, which is, a club of us as women, us spiritpreneurs, being able to have the soul care, the self-care, the skills, and the strategy that we need in order to feel whole and complete to do the work that we were born to do.
I love that. Now, how do people, I'll have a link, of course, to everything. I know you've sent me all this information, but for anyone listening who wants to go there right now, where can they go to find out information about the Badass Sisterpreneur Sisterhood?
Yeah, so for anyone who is wanting any information, the first thing is that right now I am about to start a 14-day free challenge to get unblocked, to deal with some of those issues. And you can find that at Unblock My Energy. That's what it is. Unblockmyenergy.com. If you go to unblockmyenergy.com and you sign up right there, then you will automatically, be able to start with that immediately. And if you go to ownyourbombshell.com, and I'm going to give you all the links so that you can put them below,
right,
that you can then also download my free self-worth tools to be able to begin on this journey if these are challenges that you're having.
So unblockyourenergy.com and then ownyourbombshell.com.
Yes, Unblock My Energy. Unblockmyenergy.com. Yes.
Unblockmyenergy.com and ownyourbombshell.com. Excellent. So
yes.
For everyone listening, we'll have links to everything, but just so you can hear it in case you want to, if you're at work and you want to sneak on and see what's going on. So tell us about the brand Sacred Bombshell and what it means to be a sacred bombshell.
Yes. So I'm so passionate about this, that a sacred bombshell is a woman who loves, honors, and cherishes herself in mind, body, and spirit. Mm-hmm. And being a sacred bombshell is all about leading your life from a position of being in love with yourself. And so if there's a decision you're trying to make about your job, about your relationship, about, your business or whatever it is, even as a mother, as a parent, whatever it is, start from what is the most self-loving choice that I can make? Because that is what is going to best serve you and the other people that you live, work, and play with. So start with what is the most self-loving choice that I can make. The book that I wrote, the Sacred Bombshell Handbook of Self-Love, presents 11 tools for enhancing our self-love, falling in love with ourselves. That all of us grew up with people telling us, love yourself, but a lot of us didn't have people that could show us. So even though they might have been able to say, love yourself, nobody knew how to do it. So this is a movement about how to do it, how to fall in love with yourself, why that matters in your life, and your business and your relationships and everything that you do.
Excellent. So now a part of your business, as you mentioned, I love what you said earlier, that you weren't a stranger to being a multi-hyphenate because of your parents. So now in your business, you have these different areas that you work in, coaching, in having courses, and doing just a variety of things. How do you make that all work together to support your overall mission? The coaching,
yes.
worksheets, the programs that you're doing, and then all the other things in the events.
Yes. Okay, so I love sharing this because so many of us, have all of these different hats, and it can feel like, whoa, you're everywhere, you're doing everything. And it's no, you are not everywhere. You are not doing everything, because if you're jack of all trades, we know you're master of none. Mm-hmm. So, figure out what is the commonality. For me, like I said, it's that I am a teacher. and these are the different, for me as a teacher and a writer, these are the different ways that goes into the world, that I am a teacher focused on self-worth, or in honor to my great grandmother, often I say that I'm a self-worth midwife, helping people to give birth to their own self-worth.
That's beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you, sis. So the way that it works as a business, and feel free to jot this down if you are a professional expert in any arena, this is really helpful to know, is, okay, as I said, writer, coach, speaker, content creator, broadcaster. So the difference between my business now and the way that it was when we talked about, when it was, my main checks were from big, mainstream media, is that at the time that I was working for them, and they were giving me a check. And that was the totality of my experience. Now, the way that it's structured is that if I'm doing a TV appearance, if I'm speaking somewhere, anything that I do is built on bringing people into my tribe or bringing people into my funnel. Mm-hmm. So as a writer, I am a content creator. As a coach, I offer one-on-one coaching and VIP coaching, and also digital programs where I do basically group coaching online. As a product creator, I have digital tools, like I just mentioned, the programs, and then also empowerment tools. So I have books, I have meditation albums, I have goddess affirmation cards. So I have physical products that people could buy. And all of these are around the common mission, the same mission that I have. And then as a broadcaster, as a media personality, I have a podcast, I do TV appearances, my videos and all of that. Like I said, it may sound like a lot, but it, again, is all the same thing in different platforms.
And you're a teacher, you're teaching through all of those different platforms.
I'm teaching through all of those different platforms. And my love, the thing that makes my heart sing, the thing that I always have been from the beginning, is a writer, and so, it's that for me is what I always, I would just do if I could just do that in my bed all day.
Right, me too, absolutely.
And then also, I'm also very passionate about the teaching, the coaching, the empowering, which sometimes is on a stage, sometimes is one-on-one, sometimes is on a TV appearance, etc.
I love that. Let me tell you, I'm going to take this as well as a challenge to myself to write down all of the hyphenates, the things that I do, and then come up with the one word that sort of ties them all together. Connector is the thing that first came to mind as you were talking, but I'm going to meditate on this. Abiola's given us something to meditate about. Really think about just the one word that sort of summarizes or captures all of the things for me, and I hope other people will take that into consideration as well. So thank you for telling us just that process and how you think about it.
You're welcome. And I see you as a connector. I think connector probably is your word.
Thank you. Wonderful. And also, I love that you mentioned this too, because just from a practical business standpoint, it's multiple streams of revenue. It doesn't sound all over the place. It sounds like, which is what, you and I experience not having when we work for one certain company. Well, you actually did. You talked about having other projects and things going on. But for me, I was so committed to whatever position I was in at that time, which worked for me at that point. But once you want to branch out, you have to sort of start from the beginning because you don't have these other things. So that's why it's smart also.
Yes. And as you know, like that, you could be working in, that there were other media companies that I worked for that were paying literally like pennies. So it could be like a big flashy column or whatever, but that didn't mean anything, was happening financially.
Right. And tell everyone the name of your podcast, which is so beautiful.
Yay. So my podcast is the Spiritpreneur School podcast, and I interview conscious, entrepreneurial, primarily women about, not only the skills, but also the soul care that it takes for them to be able to do what they do.
Love it. I have a couple of women that I'm going to recommend to you, some that I've interviewed recently that are definitely spiritpreneurs.
Yay. Okay. Excellent. And I look forward to interviewing you too, Elayne.
Am I a spiritpreneur?
You are absolutely a spiritpreneur.
I love it.
Yes.
That makes me so happy. Thank you.
Yay.
Now, one of the things that you do, you post great quotes on your Instagram. It was tough for me to pick just one because I love pulling quotes from people. But one of the quotes that you posted, the quote said, "You're always one decision away from a totally different life."
Yes.
So one of the things that I talk about often on this podcast is this idea of making brave decisions. So what's one brave decision that you've made recently where you feel that it's shifted in some way your life?
Oh, okay. That's a big question because 2016 has been the year of decisions. I know for me and for many of us, this has been a heck of a year.
Yes.
for better, on every part of it. I made a big decision that I feel like, women entrepreneurs can learn from. That I did a test project where, like I said, I sell digital products, meaning courses and ebooks, but also physical products, physical books, meditation albums, goddess affirmation cards, etc. And I started an arm of my business as a test. I did a limited run of these self-care empowerment kits that were a combination of my meditation albums and mini coaching lessons. So it had a digital side and then it had a physical side. So I partnered with a woman who is an aromatherapist and an expert in doing, creating products aimed at specific physical conditions and issues. And although it was in very, very high demand, and the great thing was that because I'm an Essence columnist, that I was able to mention it in Essence magazine, and it, I had a big launch event in New York City, etc. That the customer service, the people that I hired to do customer service were not able to serve my audience in a way that I felt like was healthy for my brand and fully representative of myself. And so I made the decision to put that arm of my business on hold, which was a really, a lot of times, like, it can be really challenging when you put something out there and you put yourself out there to say, okay, I'm going to make a U-turn with this, because you don't want to seem flaky. You don't want to seem, half-assed about anything or whatever it is. But I felt like, although the demand was there, that having people email me and say, okay, either I didn't get my stuff, or I didn't get it on time, or I didn't like the way that this person emailed me, and, just things that I felt like were not positive. Like, my mission is with everything that I put into the world, every single thing, no matter how big or how small, that it's making someone's life better. So having interactions that were not representative of who I am, and at this point in time, in the future, I'll be able to do it, and be able to build properly the infrastructure to do it. But I felt like, okay, because I had successfully done digital products and I have been able to successfully do that I thought it would be a natural transition. But there were things that were not in alignment. And so making the decision to make a U-turn on that, I felt like was really important. And so there's no shame in if you feel like you've done your due diligence, and that you need to make a U-turn on something, don't just continue down the same road because you started down that path.
Right. The sunk cost fallacy, right?
Yes, the sunk cost fallacy. Absolutely. And so I, pulled it and considered it a limited edition. And we'll be able to bring it back, like I said, when I'm properly able to give it the time to build the infrastructure that is needed, that I feel well represented in the way that I'm putting it out there.
I love that. That was a great share on a brave decision, because that is one of the hardest things. I know I went through that in my version of chicrebellion.tv. I talk about how I did this party and what I wanted it to look like and what I thought it was going to be. And then as time went on, in the end of last year, it was sort of like, am I passionate about this in the way that I'm presenting it? Is this the way that I want it to be? Is there some, and it was tough mainly because of ego, right? I've done this thing, everybody's looking, everybody loves it. And it was just like, wow, I don't feel, I was passionate about the audience, but passionate about doing that thing and to the way that it would require for me to make it be quote unquote successful, I knew I didn't have it. I knew that wasn't it,
Right.
at that time. And like you said, to your point, that you can always do, if it's something you really desire, you can do it later or in a different way. For me, like doing this podcast and still speaking to women, still connecting, as we talked about, and all those things, it can look a different way. But just to keep going down this path, especially if money is invested, but in general, even if your energy is invested, it's sort of, you have to make the brave decision to say, I need to put this on hold and figure this out or try a new way.
Yes, yes. And I think that, and this is the first time I've ever shared this story. But I think that it's important to talk about, because failure, and fear of rejection, fear of doing something wrong is what keeps a lot of people from trying to begin with. So there was the embarrassment factor. I'm not gonna, lie that, it is embarrassing, like when my mom was like, well, what happened to that?
Right. And it's the people that you're most embarrassed in front of, right?
Right, exactly. So to be like, you know what, it didn't work. And then especially also for me as a coach, but I feel like it's better for me to come from a place of authenticity than to pretend to be able to tell my clients and the women that I speak to when I'm on stage, look, here's something that I tried and I put it out there and it didn't work. And here's how I rebounded from that, and here's what it will be in the future, is a stronger and more authentic place to come from than a place of BS.
Exactly. It's more authentic, but also in you saying, hey, this is what I tried and it didn't work. So this is why I'm telling you not to do it this way. Because that's powerful too, as opposed to just, hearing someone say, do this way, that way. And people think, oh, well, how do they know? It's like, no, I did it that way and it didn't work for me. Here's why. Why, so that's also powerful as well. I love that. Thank you for sharing that first time. That story.
You're welcome. I'm over here, brown girl blushing.
I love it. I love it. Now, what would you say is the greatest lesson having a business has taught you about yourself as a woman?
The greatest lesson that having a business has taught me is, as a woman, that I'm a lot stronger than I thought that I was. That, for a long time, like a lot of us had the Prince Charming fantasy, and I didn't even know that I had that. But it was there. So whether it's even in terms of your business, feeling like someone who knows more has to come in and somehow be your prince or princess charming to make it happen, or, something like that, just realizing that you know a lot more than you think, and you're a lot stronger than you think that you are. And so being able to learning to trust myself and trust my voice and trust my own power, I think has been definitely the biggest lesson.
Excellent. Now, if you could think over your life and career and you had the chance to thank only one person whose support was critical to you personally or professionally, who would that be and what would you say?
Wow, only one? I have two parents, only one?
You can cheat and say your parents. That's what I do.
Yeah, I would have to say my parents, because the gift that they gave me, honestly, is somehow that I got the idea that no matter who I was, that it would be okay. And that doesn't mean that they always agreed with me or things that I did, or, my dad in the beginning wanted me to be a lawyer, and so it doesn't mean that they even understand what I do or anything like that. Like, okay, well, you seem to be surviving and thriving, so I guess it's working, But they instilled in me the sense that, that I could have whatever I want, and have a sense of optimism about myself and about the world that maybe they don't even have themselves, but somehow they were able to instill that in me. So that is my biggest influence, knowing that, no matter what, that I feel loved. I feel loved in the world. I feel like that's a big gift,
That's powerful. I love it. Yes, we love the parents, especially when they don't understand what's going on, but they support you. Mine are like that too. They're like, okay, whatever. A podcast. My mother, every night I talk to her, she's like, what's it called again? A pod? I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't.
Exactly.
But they're wonderful. I love it. Now, final question. How can we support you? Tell us what to do. I'll have all the links to the websites and those things, but what are you most excited about?
Yay. So I am most excited Well, I just want to just reiterate that thank you so much, Elayne, for
Thank
having me on
you.
Support is Sexy podcast.
Yay!
Yay! So the digital gifts that I have are, of course, if you go to ownyourbombshell.com, you can download a free self-worth kit. If you go to unblockmyenergy.com, you can join a free 14-day challenge that is going to take you to the badass
Love it.
Spiritpreneur sisterhood. So you definitely want to do that. But then I think that something that would be, not only support me, but I feel like would be very supportive for your listeners as well, is that I have my goddess affirmation cards. So I have the African goddess affirmation cards. And Elayne, after this, I'm going to get your address and send you a package with books and all kinds of goodies. So I have the African goddess affirmation cards. And then I have the woman manifesting fertility goddess affirmation cards as well. And 2 different meditation albums. One is a self-love meditation album and one is a manifest your mojo, your magic, and your miracles album. So I think that those would be really helpful, and people can find everything at sacredbombshell.com if you forget any of these links, or shop.sacredbombshell.com.
Excellent. Thank you. I accept whatever package you're going to send me. Thank you. But sacredbombshell.com. I'm so amazed by you. Just everything you're doing and creating with your business and the type of business, but then all the products and resources and things that you're able to generate for women. It's beautiful to see and inspiring.
Thank you, Elayne.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I look forward to hanging with you in person. Where are you based these days?
I'm in Brooklyn. I'm in Bed-Stuy.
Okay, good. So we have to have a play date before it gets cold.
Yes, everybody is so funny in New York. I guess probably in other cities too, but definitely in New York, it's like, look, after a certain time, when it gets cold, everybody ends the sentence with, let's do whatever before it gets cold.
Exactly.
I love it. Before you go, and I really appreciate you, what is a parting piece of advice for our audience from you?
A parting piece of advice that I would give would be to trust your intuition, that we are the only animals that don't trust our intuition. If my kitty cat hears something or feels something coming, or, animals, if there's a hurricane coming, they trust their intuition and they're out. So trust your gut, this is going to be very woo-woo because I'm a woo-woo kind of chick.
Me too.
There's a decision you're trying to make, put your hands on your belly and ask your body what you should do. You know deep down. Often you're only asking other people to validate, what it is that you already know. So if there's a decision you're trying to make, put your hands on your belly or your hands over your heart, ask your body and trust your sacred bombshell intuition.
I love it. That is perfect. I'm going to put my hands on my belly for a few decisions I'm making.
Yes.
That is perfect. I love it. Thank you so much, Abiola. I appreciate you.
You're welcome, goddess. Thank you. This was so fun.
Thank you. Hold on for 1 second.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you got something out of this episode. And the challenge is to take at least one thing from the episode. You can always do more than one thing, but at least one thing from the episode. Take action, move forward today. You can also check out previous episodes that I've done with past inspiring women entrepreneurs and creatives. Go to supportissexypodcast.com. Again, supportissexypodcast.com. Check out previous episodes, leave comments, get in touch with me. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you want to hear in the future. I am here to support you. While you're there, be sure to click the free resources button and check out some things that I'm offering completely free. That's why they're free resources, including an audio training on making brave decisions. You can also support me by leaving a review on iTunes or Stitcher, wherever you're listening to this. Let me know what you think about the podcast. Leave a rating. Hopefully it's a 5-star rating, but that would really help me and I would love to hear from you. So now, you know what to do. Go out there and create something sexy, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care.